Welcome to the Part S channel. Today we explain Prophets Kings 1, chapter 17 in a clear and simple way, step by step. We're going to dig right into the exact foundation of this incredible text, and we're going to do it without getting bogged down in complicated jargon. So, if you're ready to really understand what's happening here, you are absolutely in the right place.
Okay, let's take a quick look at our agenda for this explainer so you know exactly where we're headed. We have 6 parts today. First, an introduction and brief context. Second, the drought is declared. Third, the jar and the jug. Fourth, reviving the widow's son. Fifth, key ideas and lessons. And finally, number 6, our chapter recap.
All right, section 1, introduction and brief context.
Before we actually jump into verse 1, we need to talk about exactly how we're approaching this text. We are focusing purely on the Peshat. Now, what does that mean? It means we're looking strictly at the plain, literal, grammatical meaning of the text. We're not relying on outside mystical interpretations like Kabbalah or Sod. We're simply asking what actually happened here according to the text. This literal approach is the absolute foundation of true understanding.
So, to understand why chapter 17 kicks off the way it does, we have to see what happened right before it. If we look at 1 Kings chapter 16, verse 33, it explicitly states, Ahab also made an Asherah pole and did more to provoke the Lord, the God of Israel, to anger than did all the kings of Israel before him. Wow, the text really doesn't mince words here, does it? King Ahab has essentially dragged the entire nation into profound idolatry, directly breaking the commandments of God. And it's this historical reality, this specific provocation, that serves as the direct trigger for the sudden and really severe events we're about to see in chapter 17.
And that brings us to section 2. The drought is declared. We are moving from a completely corrupt king right into a major confrontation. Let's look at how this crucial narrative begins. A whole new phase of history starts with one man delivering a singular, devastating message. Let's read this carefully. Now Elijah the Tishbite, from Tishbe in Gilead, said to Ahab, As the Lord, the God of Israel lives, whom I serve, there will be neither dew nor rain in the next few years, except at my word. Notice the absolute authority Elijah is given here. He doesn't say God kind of might send a drought or that rain will be scarce. No, he says there will be literally zero dew or rain except at my word. He is effectively locking up the heavens. This is a massive, severe judgment on the land governed by King Ahab.
We really want to take our time here, so notice the specific geographical naming. Elijah is a Tishbite from Gilead. This anchors him as a real person in real physical history. He delivers this decree that instantly devastates the entire agricultural economy of the nation. But the text doesn't just skip ahead. Verses 2 through 12 tell us exactly what happens to Elijah next. God commands him to go hide in the Cherith ravine, east of the Jordan River, and while he's there, God miraculously feeds him using ravens. These birds actually bring him bread and meat every single morning and evening, and he drinks directly from the brook. But eventually, because there has been absolutely no rain in the land, that brook entirely dries up. And it's at that exact moment that God commands Elijah to get up and go to Zarephath of Sidon to stay with a widow.
Moving right along to section 3, the jar and the jug.
So, Elijah arrives in Zarephath. He meets the widow and asks her for some water and a piece of bread. But she tells him she has nothing left, literally nothing, except a handful of flour in a jar and a tiny bit of oil in a jug. In fact, she's gathering sticks to make one final meal for herself and her son before they die of starvation. It's a completely desperate situation. But Elijah tells her not to fear. He says, Go home and do as you have said. But first make a small cake of bread for me from what you have and bring it to me, and then make something for yourself and your son. For this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says, The jar of flour will not be used up, and the jug of oil will not run dry until the day the Lord gives rain on the land.
This right here brilliantly illustrates a step-by-step test of faith. Think about what she's being asked to do. She isn't just asked to believe a nice concept, she is asked to take action. Step 1, she must make a small cake for Elijah first, using her very last, incredibly precious resources. Step 2, only then is she to make food for herself and her son. And step 3, she must entirely trust the spoken promise that the flour and oil won't run out. It's a huge request. It demands complete literal obedience to the prophet's instructions.
And the result? It's immediate. Verse 15 tells us she obeyed. She went away and did exactly as Elijah had told her. And then verse 16 confirms the miracle, for the jar of flour was not used up, and the jug of oil did not run dry, in keeping with the word of the Lord spoken by Elijah. The plain meaning here is undisputed. God's literal provision sustains them day by day. You can imagine it. Every single day she goes to the jar and there is just enough flour. She goes to the jug and there is just enough oil, exactly as the prophet spoke.
Now we arrive at section 4, reviving the widow's son.
Just when things seem finally stable in that household, disaster strikes from a completely unexpected direction. The reality of the boy's severe illness is stated bluntly in verse 17. Sometime later, the son of the woman who owned the house became ill. He grew worse and finally stopped breathing. The text doesn't use any euphemisms here. It's plainly stated. The breathing stopped. The child has died. Notice the really stark contrast between how the mother and Elijah react in the text. In verse 18, we see the mother's absolute guilt-ridden panic. She cries out to Elijah, "What do you have against me, man of God? Did you come to remind me of my sin and kill my son?" She is desperately trying to make sense of this sudden tragedy, looking for some cause and effect reason in her own past. But look at Elijah's response in verse 19. He doesn't argue theology with her. He doesn't panic. He just offers a calm, incredibly direct instruction. Give me your son.
The crucial point here is Elijah's exact procedure, which is laid out very specifically in verses 19 through 21. Let's track his actions. Step 1. He takes the boy from her arms, carries him up to his own upper room, and lays him on his bed. Step 2. He prays intensely, crying out to the Lord, "O Lord my God, have you brought tragedy also upon this widow I am staying with by causing her son to die?" And then step 3, we see this very specific, unusual physical action. The text literally says he stretched himself out on the boy 3 times and cried to the Lord, "O Lord my God, let this boy's life return to him."
We definitely shouldn't rush past this incredible moment. Verse 22 gives us the astonishing result. The Lord heard Elijah's cry, and the boy's life returned to him, and he lived. It's stated so simply, but it is so powerful. The literal text says the boy's life returned purely because the Lord heard Elijah's cry. It is a direct, immediate answer to a direct prayer, restoring physical breath and life to the child.
Just imagine the sheer relief and the ultimate validation of God's power at this exact moment. In verse 23, Elijah picks up the living, breathing child, carries him back downstairs from that upper room, and simply hands him to his mother, saying, "Look, your son is alive." The evidence of the miracle is right there, undeniable. The boy who had completely stopped breathing is breathing again, placed right back into his mother's arms.
All right, section 5, key ideas and lessons.
Let's pull back for a second and distill exactly what we've seen into clear, actionable ideas for our own lives. From the literal events of this chapter, we draw some very practical lessons. First, trusting in divine provision during times of extreme lack. Remember, the widow had to trust God for her daily bread when she had literally nothing left. Second, we see the life-saving power of direct, fervent prayer. Elijah cried out directly to God, and God listened. Third, the vital importance of obeying God's word step by step, just like the widow did when she made Elijah's bread first. And finally, recognizing God's absolute, unmatched power over life, death, and nature itself. These are simple but profound truths we can use to improve ourselves today.
And that overriding theme connects everything. It's all about the absolute authority of the word of the Lord spoken through his prophet. Think about it. Everything that happened in this chapter, from the declared drought that literally shut up the heavens, to the unending flour and oil that sustained a starving family, to the revived son drawing breath once again, it all occurred exactly according to God's spoken word. The text repeats it for us, in keeping with the word of the Lord. When the word goes out, reality itself has to bow to it.
Okay, let's move to section 6, chapter recap.
Let's summarize the chronological flow of this entire chapter just to lock it firmly into our memory. This timeline maps our precise journey through the text. We began in year 1 with the severe judgment declared to Ahab. Then we moved to Elijah's isolation at the Cherith ravine, where ravens fed him. Days later, we witnessed the daily provision for the widow in Zarephath with the miraculous flour and oil. Then sometime later, sudden tragedy struck when the widow's son stopped breathing. And finally, moments later, the incredible climax where the son is completely revived by Elijah's direct prayer. It is a perfectly structured progression of faith, testing, and miraculous deliverance.
So, here's a final thought for you to consider. How does understanding the literal, step-by-step actions of Elijah change your own view of faith and prayer? Thank you for learning with us. If this helped you understand the chapter better, like, subscribe, and join us for the next chapter.